You want special treatment? I would love to. Buckle up, this is a long one. Once upon the before time in 2015, I worked my way through nursing school as a waitress in a restaurant. This restaurant did not advertise. They prided themselves on word of mouth for their popularity. This is important. I had been there for several months at this point, and had proved myself reliable and knowledgeable enough to help train new waiters. Not technically a trainer, but could be relied upon to support new workers once the trainers set them loose. We had one older guy who had just been released. He was a little awkward, little shy, and worried about mistakes absolutely expected, and he was great to work with. On the night of our tale, he was in the section next to mine, easy to keep an eye on and easy to hop in and prop him up when he hit the weeds. This was his first night with his own complete section. Weeds would abound. I was ready. What he wasn't ready for was his first demanding round table of about 6 people, 20-somethings with attitude. He came to me worried and confused. They want Zais, but I don't think that's on our menu, right? She says we have the ingredients and just make it, that the other location makes it all the time. Yes, I could have taught him to stand his ground, but nerves and first night with your own section isn't the time for this to go over well. So I told him ask the back line and see if they were willing. If not, I would talk to the table. Cooks were fine with it, basically a wrap if I remember correctly, so no problem from our end. This was apparently the cue for the leader of the table to demand something every time he came to the table. As soon as he brought the last requested item, she needed something else. I thought it was possible and had been keeping an eye on him. Seeing his panicked face, I gave him a nod and started checking in on his other tables, slotting them into my own table cycles, reasons I'm paired with him. This carried on for their entire meal, incredibly needy and demanding his full attention with zero apology or kindness. I made sure to catch him in the back to prepare for possibly getting no tip, but to calm the panic, and to remind him I would not be touching the tips from his other tables. Honestly, this poor guy looked like he was about to quit on the spot. This leader was rude and impatient and gave him no space to breathe. I was his emotional support animal at this point, but knowing he was at least twice my age made it even worse for him. The table had come in close to the end of the night and ended up staying past our section's closing, so they were the last table on our side of the restaurant. Perks of closing with a new waiter getting cut early. That's when he came to me asking how to do an employee discount, and they wanted to use more than one on a single ticket. Was that okay? I was confused. Wait, employee. That's when he shared that she had spent the entire meal berating and making fun of him because 1, she was a trainer at our other location, and 2, he was the worst waiter she had ever seen. No wonder the other location made her special meals, and zero surprise he was such a wreck. On top of that, she was claiming there were multiple birthdays in the group, so free cakes all around, and she wants the birthday song immediately. To say I was livid is saying lava is warm. I was ready to throw hands for this poor man. Instead, I told him to prep the cakes but don't go out yet. I would get the boss about employee discount, not needed. We could do it ourselves, but this was such a special case, and I would gather the workers for the birthday song. Managers there were absolutely amazing. We loved each one and all of them had our backs. Very rare in restaurants, so this almost the best part. I gave the front-end boss a quick rundown of the table's antics. Remember the word-of-mouth, restaurant mentality. Yeah, boss was not having a restaurant employee acting so cruelly, even if she wasn't his employee. I asked permission for what I wanted to do. He smiled and gave permission as he grabbed the employee numbers given for the discounts, which that trainer would have known could not be stacked, and told me he had a boss-to-boss phone call to make. I then ran to every employee I could grab. Remember, half the restaurant was closing down, so we had several people available, including a dishwasher, and gave them each the FASTEST explanation of the table and the plan. And then I told the poor nerve-wracked server that we were ready to drop cakes. The crowd that arrived to that six-person tabletop was honestly the largest we had ever had for a birthday song, and I am pretty confident the largest that restaurant will ever have. We served free cakes in front of every seat, and Leader had the most self-satisfied smirk as we all grinned ecstatically and lined up to sing. And oh, did we sing! We all sang that birthday song as loud as possible. Please do recall they were the last table in the section, and for your imaginings, I should mention this table was in the corner as well. So while we were screaming the birthday song, it was bouncing back from that corner as well, and it was an excruciatingly long song. Their smiles dropped immediately, and hands covered their ears as they jumped with the audio onslaught. I know it hurt my ears, and that pain is something that still makes me smile to this day. We all stood there, giant group, happily screaming our restaurant's special happy birthday song, and it still warms my heart a decade later. More than that, while we were gathering and planning and destroying eardrums, our boss was making phone calls in the office. Yes, he called her restaurant manager and informed them of her behavior. And no, she didn't get stacked employee discounts. She didn't get her discount at all. I know because I was there when she was handed the phone from my front-end manager at the host desk, and when she started to cry and tried to make her excuses for why she shouldn't be fired. But the general manager, one step below owner, since this was a small company with very few locations, had already been called, her employee number had been shared, and she was done. I'm not psychic. She could have gone back to her home location and convinced someone to hire her back. Anything is possible. But I know how she treated this poor guy. I know how I told the tale to my boss, and I know the quiet rage he so rarely touched when it was rage. I would have almost given up joining in that screaming song to be able to hear those phone calls. Almost. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord, and it was glorious. Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who is extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away, before anything was put in writing. Pensive face. Enter the new owners. The lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days there would be an open house, and with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently, and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It is pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered, we moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture and borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt more smaller. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors, because it smells like all the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas nauseated face. Neighborhood. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped in front yard of the neighbor across the road, with permission of course. Neighborhood X2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. Neighborhood X3. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbor set up a barbecue in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple of weeks or so. They have an after-party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The party-goer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greed bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it, strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. Smiling face with horns. For all the people who are saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. My ex-mill sent her church friends to harass my daughters, and I have now exposed her family to her church community, and she's getting shamed and shunned at church. My 46F daughters, 17 and 15, have a strained relationship with my ex-husband's parents, 78M and 80F. My ex passed away in an accident last year, and we've had some major family drama since due his cheating and him leaving 2 boys born with his affair partner orphaned. She also died. Part of the drama has been my ex-in-laws trying to get custody of my daughters and them also trying to live with us. First one we're going to court over, second one will never happen. Where we live, there's a weekend market with fresh produce, eggs, meats, and other products straight from farmers. This week was extra special since it was my youngest birthday. Since her party is later in the month, I decided to give her a budget and set her loose on the market to get whatever she wanted, mostly chocolate and sweets. After an hour, I did start getting worried, and just before I called her, she called me. She was crying, saying some weird people have cornered her. I ran to her with my oldest daughter to find 6 older women berating my daughter for being unchristian, for refusing to spend time with her paternal grandparents, or for wanting to be a good big sister to her poor orphaned baby brothers. My daughters are the ones that found out about my ex cheating and the bobbies, so they aren't fond of the kids. It's trauma, and they are working with a therapist. I got between the group and my daughter, telling my eldest to go pay the stuff her sister had and to go to the car. Then I turned to the women, some who I knew from when we went to my ex-in-law's church, and ripped them a new one. They told me I was worst for refusing to obey my ex-in-laws like a good Christian wife. Barf. Eventually, the screaming turned too loud and we were all asked to leave the market. I met with my girls in the car, the women following me like a group of vultures. I managed to get in the car and drove away. After my girls went to bed, I got online to talk to another member of that church that I'm in good terms. I told him about what happened, and after he apologized, he told me what was going on. My ex-mother-in-law posted this massive story in the church's Facebook group about how horrible my daughters and I are, how we are leaving them homeless and penniless. They inherited my ex-personal bank account and his life insurance, and how my daughters don't even talk to them. She also accused us of being the reason she lost her grandsons. The boys are now living with distant relatives of my ex-husband. Basically, it was a sob story worthy of a Hallmark movie. And of course, they were getting all the love and support from the more extremist members of their church. This church and its members are a bit annoying, especially with LGBTQ+ topics, but they have a small saving grace. They are incredibly strict about cheating. It's a big no-no, be it from a husband or a wife equally. Now, how did she get around blaming me about affair children without exposing the cheating? She claimed the other woman was our surrogate since I was unable to have more children. Then said I didn't want the Bobbies because they were boys, which is absolutely disgusting to be accused of. Well, I decided it was time to clean up this mess, and since I was mid-divorce when my ex died, I had all the evidence needed. And since the divorce wasn't completed, I don't have any legal ramification for releasing all the evidence. I was off the next day and went to a print shop to get copies of all the delightful pictures of my ex cheating, his text conversations with his affair partner, the ones with his parents confessing to his cheating and getting support from them, my ex-in-laws harassing me about the divorce, and my coup de grace. All the emails and text messages of them bullying my daughters about their baby brothers. In one of them, they call my daughters bastards, and telling them it was their fault their father died since they told me about the affair and I began the divorce. This one was literally 2 days after my ex died. I paid extra for all of this to be printed in beautiful high-quality paper. Then when I got home, I sat down for hours to make delightfully personalized binders. They look like the little prayer song packets the church give for everyone to take to sing hymns. The first picture when opening the binders is my ex and his side woman making out in our living room. Their faces are easy to discern, and the girl looks nothing like me. Different skin tones and hair color. Underneath I wrote, ex-husband's name and affair girl's name love story. I took them to the church before service. There's a desk in the back with the song books for people that need forget their own, and they never check them. The gossip mill was quick and harsh. The names my ex and his affair partner got called in the Facebook were so bad the pastor himself had to get involved just to keep things relatively PG-13. People were angry at my ex-in-laws for their abuse to my daughters, but what made me laugh was that I was still in the wrong for the divorce. But it is understandable that I failed on my duties after the shock, and I possibly will one day return to the light, unlike my cheating husband and his Jezebel. They used another word I can't use here, I imagine. I got 2 apology letters in the mail for my girl and an invitation to join the church for support. As for my ex-in-laws, they got shamed into leaving the church. My ex-mother-in-law made a post on her wall about how alienated she feels and how no one cares for the elderly anymore. How she wished her great son was still alive since he would have taken care of her and her husband. With what money, I don't know, since I was the breadwinner. Explanation on the will. My ex-husband had a will that named his parents as beneficiaries. As far as I was aware, he had told me he had named our daughters, not them. I never pushed for me to be the beneficiary, as my own will has my daughters as the beneficiaries, not him. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the neighborhood. But I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house. So my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6FT guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden only cost like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say. TLDR. Bought an abandoned house. Neighbor was siphoning water from my supply. Turned off my water supply when the motor was running. Motor burned out the wiring in the house and cut off water and power to him and his tenants. Tenants lodged police complaints and the landlord got fined, is now destitute and forced to move in with his daughter.